body too.
It's
Like-
such an interesting, it's
Like,
always been an
are we
interesting
supposed to
topic.
be?
And when I was real young, the teachers from the 70s who were like 20 years older than me were like, and I'd always be like, there's something wrong with it. And now I'm kind of like, yeah, it's just an interesting conversation. So yeah, let's talk more. I think as a community, it'd be a good talk.
Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I know. I'm not on Facebook though. So I'm like, well, maybe
Oh, that's right.
mind meld sort of thing. Hi, everyone. Caleb and I were just having an interesting conversation about, you want to know what about? About how, well, maybe we'll talk about it more in Seat of the Teacher, which is your last week. I think that could be a good conversation in Seat of the Teacher.
That
too.
would be a good comment.
So start thinking about, and I don't want your answers yet, but we'll come back to this when we do Seat of the Teacher, because, and I don't know the answers. It's just an interesting ongoing, I mean, this has been a conversation in yoga for decades. I remember when I was a very young student coming up and the teachers, it was a controversy then, but like how we dress, not as practitioners, but as teachers, how it affects, hi, come on in, accessibility to students. Okay, just planting that seed. Good morning. I'm so happy to see you all. Thanks for being here. Good morning, good morning. How's everyone feeling today? How about let's do a quick fist to 5. If you're like, I can barely hold my eyelids open, I might need to like prop them with toothpicks. That's a 0. If you're like, I've got so much energy, I don't know what to do with it, you're a 5. So show me where you're at this morning, please. A 1, you just got back from Yellowstone, huh? Ah, 3, kind of a 2.5. You're like, is that a 5? 5, 4? All right.
Like nuclear energy.
Nuclear energy powered. We've got a student in 300 hour who's like that, and everyone else will be so tired. You know, it's like day 2 and they've already done however many hours that weekend. And she's just like, I feel like I've been plugged into a socket. And everyone else is just like,
The house.
Oh, well, it is so good to see you all. I want to get you moving a bit first. You were like dramatically raising your hand, like out of the corner of my eye. I just saw. I have a thought to share.
I'm always like this.
So the fist of 5 will just suit us for our little check-in this morning, because I want to lead you through a little something. I think a tiny bit of movement will be good. I'm not going to do a lot. It's literally going to be between 1 to 3 minutes. I'm not even sure yet. And Caleb, I apologize because I don't always do this and consider it. It's hard to be my intern because I teach things. I really try to stick with the plan, but I teach things a little differently every time. But I want to lead you through a little Sun B. That being said, you haven't warmed up. We're going to go right into Sun B. So do a warm-up. We're going to do like a soft Sun B, right? So when I'm giving these cues, don't be like warrior 2. It's just a soft warrior 2, right? So let's start in a down dog and let's take 30 seconds to a minute to just kind of like, if you need to move a little bit otherwise, please go ahead and do so. And what I want you, as you're getting a little bit of movement in your body, a little bit of that prana flowing, let me tell you what I'm asking of you during this. Of course, to be gentle and soft with your body, but also just notice how this is perhaps different than what you're used to. Yeah. Notice breath cues. Notice just what's different about it. Okay. All right. So let's find our way to down dog. As always, if down dog isn't right for you, another great option is tabletop position. So you could take a tabletop. From here, inhale, lift the right leg up toward the ceiling. Exhale, pull it through between your hands. Okay, come on down to your knees. I want to show something. Just come to seated. We're pretending we're beginners. That's what's happening, by the way. All right, so how many people got your foot all the way forward? Maybe, maybe not, right? And most beginners are going to be, you're not going to ask them like I just did, but they're going to be like, "Nah, not even close, like it's way back by the other foot." So I like to take this moment to be like, okay, let me show you a little trick. A lot of times the reason people's leg doesn't come forward, right? We do this crazy three-legged down dog sort of thing, is because people are staying in down dog and trying to bring it forward. So what I want you to do is to pivot your shoulders like you're going back into plank and then bring it forward. And you're going to get it a lot closer. And then from there, you may need to like promise yourself chocolate later or something, but scooch that foot all the way so that the ankle's under the knee. Does that make sense? Questions? Do you see how this becomes a sticking point? Right? So what we're gonna do 3 on each side. Let me actually demo real quick. Here's what we're gonna do. Inhale, lift the leg. It can be just lifted to here, it doesn't matter. Exhale, pivot the shoulders over the wrist, tap it down as far forward as you can. Inhale up, we're just building some muscle memory. Exhale forward, inhale up, and then this time we're gonna take it all the way through. Yeah? All right, I'll guide you through that. So meet me in down dog or your tabletop position. Let's take a breath in. Flutter your lips, make some noise. All right, inhale, lift the right leg. Exhale, pivot your shoulders, tap the foot forward. Get it as far forward as you can. Inhale, send it back. Just building muscle memory. Exhale, come through, tap it forward. Inhale, send it back, 3-legged down dog. Exhale, bring the foot through this time. Bring it all the way between the hands. You may need to scooch. Yeah, it can be awkward. That's yoga. We're awkward in yoga, right? Inhale, warrior 2. Pivot the back foot down to the ground. All right. Now if we were in a normal class, I'd get to where I'm mirroring you all. It's hard in a half circle. But I want you to look down and make sure you can see your big toe inside that front knee. Good. Look out over your front middle finger. Inhale here. Exhale, can you sink a little deeper if that's comfortable and feels okay on your knee? Inhale. Exhale. Inhale, reverse warrior. Your backhand rests gently on the thigh. Front arm reaches up. Keep the lower body the same. Inhale. Exhale, soften. Inhale. Exhale, cartwheel your hands all the way to the mat. Step back to a plank on your knees. Inhale here. Exhale, lower to the belly. If you want, or go right to down dog. Inhale, baby cobra. We would have already learned this chaturanga. Exhale, down dog or tabletop position. All right, let's get that on the other side. Inhale, lift the left leg. Exhale, tap it forward. You can do this from tabletop. Inhale, send it back. Exhale, pivot the shoulders, tap the foot forward. Inhale, send it back. All right, this time we're sticking our landing. Pull it through as you exhale. Get that foot all the way up there. And inhale, rise up, warrior 2. On the other side this time. And let's do that again. Check down. Is the big toe peeking out inside the front foot? Good. Now this time, are your shoulders reaching forward? If they are, pulling back a little so shoulders are over the hips. Look out over your front middle finger. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale, reverse warrior. Back arm floats down, front arm floats up. But as you breathe here, stay solid in the lower body. Let the upper body stretch open. Inhale. Exhale, cartwheel the hands to the mat. Find plank position on the knees. From the side, you line up ear, shoulder, hip, knee. Exhale, lower to the belly. Inhale, cobra. and exhale, down dog or tabletop. Let's take a breath together. Inhale. Flutter your lips. Good. Maybe shake your hips side to side a little. And then come on down to seated. Okay. Now, that was a little demo of how I might teach Warrior 2 to a beginner's class. And that's what we're doing today. In case you have no idea, because you don't look at the schedule, you're like, I just got to be there and stuff's going to happen. Who does that, by the way? Anyone? Yeah, I don't know which side of, I don't know where I'd be on that spectrum, but we're doing considerations for beginners. So today's class, and Caleb is here with me again today. He's observing. It is about how you would we're going to do big ideas of what to do in a beginner's class, and then we'll also look at our sequence and I'm going to give you a set of questions that you can always use when you're looking at how can I make this work for beginners. And it's going to help you filter it through so that no matter what your sequence is, if you are like, oh no, I had a regular class and 10 beginners showed up and not one single regular practitioner, you can kind of filter it through that. But in general, we're looking at how do you teach a whole class for beginners? That's our goal today. And I love teaching this because I love teaching beginners. Do you like teaching beginners?
Mhm.
Do you think it's more or less challenging than a regular class?
More.
Why?
I've been practicing over 11 years and I was cyclist very active before that. So my body doesn't internally understand their experience.
Uh-huh.
And so my body naturally is more mobile than most beginner practitioners. And I say most, some people walk in and they have natural mobility or just don't know the poses or something. But so being able to understand like their body shape and how their anatomy is structured at the moment and how to cue them in a way that makes the poses accessible takes a lot more brain work for me, and to articulate it in a way that's clear for newer practitioners.
Yeah. It's a whole other, it's just a whole other thing. And that is very common. If you're someone who found the physical practice of asana, if you started very young, or if you were, say, a dancer or an ice skater or something, and it just came to you, although I will say dancers and ice skaters tend to go into hypermobility, and then we're like, whoa, bring it back. Bring it back. Or if you're just a hypermobile person and you think yoga came to you easily, but then 10 years later, you've done joint damage. That's a whole other story, but we'll talk about that later. But you might, if you're at that end of the spectrum, it can be very challenging because we have got to put ourselves in that beginner's, not just mindset, but body set, right? Like what's going on in their bodies and their minds together. And then at the other end too, is if this is a place where if you had challenges and you still are as a beginner, it's actually going to support you in teaching them. And I just want to make sure, are phones being used for this? Okay, I just like to double check because I don't always know. And when everyone's looking down, I'm not sure. So who has taught a beginner during your practice teaching so far? Hi, come on in. Yeah. What is something you've noticed about teaching beginners that is different?
I think it's really my partner. I've just been kind of using him as
Yeah,
to walk
as your
through the
guinea pig.
sequence and make sure that cues make sense. And I mean, when we're in the room and going through posture clinic, like chair pose, everybody in here knows what that means. If you're
Yeah.
talking to somebody who's never been into the yoga class, they're like, cool, what's that?
Exactly. Yeah, so
But
you
then-
can't just, we don't get the luxury of just saying, inhale, halfway lift, draw your shoulder blades together. They're like, what's halfway lift, right? So it takes, we have to do things differently. What else have you noticed if you've worked? Have you two both worked with beginners? Have you noticed? What have you noticed? Hi, by the way. I didn't know you were gonna be with us today. You're making it up? Did you meet everyone? Okay. What have you noticed, Hannah?
You can see a lot more expressions of a pose or, and it's not wrong necessarily either. You're just gonna see a lot more versions of how a warrior two might look or a high plank.
Oh,
might look.
that's so diplomatically said.
Yeah, taking it as a practitioner to not be like, no, and force them into.
Yes, that's gonna go right into my first point. I just want to see, do you have anything
Yeah,
else?
I was practicing with my younger brother, so he's like 12 years old, so he's kind of a goofy kid, but with him, it's like he doesn't understand that like it's different than a workout because there's a balance of challenge and ease in a lot of the poses that
Oh, yeah.
the poses shouldn't feel impossible. And so it's like, okay, well, if this is, too hard to like hold it for more than a breath, like we can do something, on your knee or something different. But I think some people that are in it as a beginner, like they come in and they think it's supposed to feel impossible or really hard. And so the kind of figuring out that it's like, it's supposed to be kind of hard, but it's also supposed to be like, you can hold it for
Yeah.
a certain duration. So understanding, and especially I feel like that with people that are athletes, like they think it's supposed to be hard because they're used to working out and like you're giving 100% in everything, but 100% in yoga is supposed to feel different because it's more about like
So well said.
the breath and being
Mhm.
connected to that than like,
And
can
that'll-
I just like feel strong, push into this balance.
I don't think it's just athletes either. I'll tell you, I taught the Monday night beginners for like a decade or more, and I've taught a lot of beginners. It's just a place I really love to teach. But I think you're so right because so many people, especially in our culture, we're like, if I don't feel it, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And so they come in very hard and efforting but also efforting because they're efforting. There's both. It's just like, there's this trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And then there's also this like, I gotta get my ass kicked today. Like, or it's like we have this as a culture, this like, I have to, if I'm doing something physical, it's gotta kick my butt or it's not worth it. And that's where yoga kind of works its magic because it's like, no matter how much we say, it's not about this. Over time, this is something that they start to figure out like, oh, okay. And that really leads to, one of the first things I want to say with the class is to pick your battles. So what do you think? By pick your battles, of course, I just mean focus on what is essential and let the other stuff go. So Hannah was talking about, and Hannah, I love how you said, I will never be able to repeat that as sweetly as you said it. But yeah, people have, whoops, warrior two for a beginner. If it's looking, I got it, thanks. If it's looking like this, what's my focus gonna be? The knee. Yeah, and then if I get the knee right, and this is still like this, who cares? Because honestly, if I mess with this stuff, the knee's gonna go back to here. So like, let's work on foundation and safety. Safety, safety, safety. I don't care if they are doing weird stuff with their hands or their face. They'll do weird stuff. Everyone does weird stuff with their face to some degree when we're doing yoga. But like we've got to be creating safety first. So it's a time where we can't get nitpicky with alignment because it's just not going to happen. If you do that, you're just not even going to get past the first pose. You're going to spend a full hour in like child's pose. And it's also just, you may know this, but I'm not sure. Do you know that when you're learning a new physical activity, you're actually building new nerves in the body? Like, yes, neural pathways to get the brain and the body to talk, but then new nerves to make the thing happen more efficiently and with greater ease. And that's where some of the ease comes from too. But yeah, so at first you'll also see people efforting. And to some degree, we just keep telling them, but also realizing they're not going to get it till they get it. Right? It's not gonna land till it lands, but you just trusting if I keep weaving certain things through, eventually, like I'm planting little seeds that eventually will happen. So that's really during class. Any adjustment and cues are going to be safety focused. And we will come back to what happens during the class in a minute, but what do you think are some ideas of what can happen before class to help them? Well, let's step back. What was it like going to your first class before you walked in the door? Intimidated?
Hyping yourself up in the car.
Right, which you have to do because it's new.
Relying very heavily on like what other people were doing, like to know.
Oh yeah, once you're in there for sure, yeah. Who had a barrier of anything, whether it's in your own head or what society says, like who yoga's for or anything like that? Who had a barrier you had to cross to get to yoga? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I did. It took me forever to get into a studio. I practiced on my own and learned so many bad habits forever because it's just, there's a lot of outer messaging about who yoga's for. And there's also a lot of, we receive that and speak to ourselves in certain ways about who yoga is for. And then we also, it's just a new experience. So it's so important to be like, when we're greeting beginners, to recognize like, wow, like you made it here today. Like that, you were so brave today. Like that is amazing. And truly, I think that's the case for everyone every time they come to yoga to some degree, because we're just like, who knows what's going to happen today? Like, I'm going to make these weird shapes and breathe and be in a room full of other people and swaha, let it go. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to do it. It takes a certain amount of nerve and faith to do these things. So we want to honor that. So what are some things we want to do when they come in, or say when we walk into the room and we're getting ready to teach, to create as an environment that allows for a safe feeling as much as we can? Yeah.
I think finding common ground, and that can help you too. Maybe they've never done yoga, but they've done ballet, or I don't know, that's
Yeah.
probably not normal, but they've done maybe something else where that can help you too, teaching, like they've never done halfway lift, but you've ever picked up groceries, like things like that, that can help you in
Yeah.
class too, and finding common ground just helps someone feel comfortable.
Good. And I want to just keep going around. Do you have a thought, Christina?
Letting them know that, like, making them feel comfortable,
Yeah.
that certain poses are going to feel weird, but there's an adjustment, and
Mm-hmm.
also, I guess, reminding them to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah. And they won't, by the way. They're going to hold their breath for an hour. But
Easier said than done.
if we keep saying it, eventually it takes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think your point cannot be overstated, is how important it is to make an effort to make people feel welcome and to point out, like, this is going to feel weird. It's going to be awkward. Like, I used to, sometimes I theme beginners classes because we still want to do some kind of theming. And I do like little themes that were also kind of lightening the mood, because they come in so, I'm here for yoga. Oh dear God, what's gonna happen? You know, and it's like, so something around like embracing your inner dork. Right? Because you've got to like, you're gonna feel uncomfortable today. You're gonna feel really awkward. Your little inner 12-year-old is gonna be like, what's, oh my gosh. And so speaking to that, I think is really important. Yeah. Yeah. What else?
Well, I've done before, like, I felt like back to basics, and so when I have like all the props, I show like, okay, here's a few different ways to use them so that people are here, like, familiar with some of the tools available to them in class, so that they can feel empowered to, you know, use them and find things, because you can't say like, oh, there's like 6 different ways to use props in any given pose. But also just kind of saying there's lots of different kinds of yoga, and so I think sometimes people come into one class and they don't like it, and then they're like, yep, not for me. And I just kind of remind people like, okay, there's this kind,
Yeah.
like, you can always test out different things.
And I think that's so important because as teachers, especially with beginners, and I want someone from this side of the room, what is our goal for beginners? And really any student, get them to come back. And does it matter if it's to our class?
Nope.
No, we just, I mean, the whole thing is we've got to go into this. If we really believe yoga is going to be good for people and support them in their lives and their well-being, I don't care what class you go to. I don't care what studio you go to. I just want to give you a sweet enough introduction to yoga that you will try it again. And that might mean also even having conversations when they leave and being like, hey, what was that like for you? If you say, how was it? You'll always get great. So really getting in there and being like, how'd that feel in your body? Or did you have any calm moments? Like really just doing those connecting questions. And if they didn't, reminding them, first off, it takes at least 3 times for anything we're doing to make sense. I usually tell them that in the beginning. Like it takes at least 3 times to start to get that brain body connection. But, you know, if you keep trying it and you still don't like it, and there's all these other options. Okay, let's do one more. Did you have any for us?
Something that came to mind was like choosing a universal or certain experience. It's going through, like if it's teaching them, you know, around, I don't know, like a holiday or something to connect with them, like, oh, I'm feeling this way, are you guys feeling that way too? And like, look, we're like having a similar experience
Yeah,
outside of the.
I love that. And that's just a way, because we want to build connection, and that helps to build a sense of like, oh yeah, my teacher's just another human in the room with me, because they really do sometimes come in and forget that their teachers are just out there also like annoyed with fireworks for 4th of July. That's me. My dogs don't like them, so I'm always like, why? But you know, or maybe, and then you can make jokes or something, but just being, I think even also what you're getting to is just being authentic, right? And creating this space where it's just like, I like to invite them to ask questions. I like to make stupid jokes that sometimes they laugh at, and sometimes they don't, but at least it's like, if they're not laughing, a lot of times it's just because they're being so serious and focused in their mind, but they're getting this idea that like, again, we're taking the yoga seriously, but not ourselves. And like, you get to show up in this space as you.
I don't know how I would do this, but thought came up, reminding that the practice is for them. That
Mm.
if what they want to get out of it, have that intention, maybe like some steep.
That can be a nice, and that'll go to our intention setting with
Mhm.
beginners, right? We probably don't want to do like, so Sutra 1.34, Pratipaksha Bhavana, we're probably not doing that one, right? But what are some themes we could do with beginners that would be just accessible, simple?
Like a curiosity.
Curiosity. That's so good for beginners.
Connection.
Connection. Yeah. What else? That's a really good one for beginners. Yeah,
breathing.
breathing, but even though they're not gonna breathe.
I went to a class that was, it was animals around the lake.
Oh.
Around the lake,
Like swans.
like they're themed, like they're lake animals, or they're just.
They
I-
took
'cause
some liberties.
I
but-
imagine tigers. I just imagined a bunch of animals having a picnic in a lake. I was like, this sounds like a kid's.
But it was like an animals.
Yeah, I love that. And you can be a little silly with it. And sometimes that too gets to that inner, because we want people to just soften up and have some fun and be light. One other thing I want to say, so at the beginning, you're not going to take a huge amount of time, but you do want to do these things. You want to thank them for being there. That is part of what's welcoming, is just showing gratitude, of course. We want to let them know if you have questions, ask at any time. And remind them several times, say, what questions do you have? Not, do you have questions? What's the difference?
It's an invite.
Expects, yeah, like expects that each person has.
Yeah, as soon as you say, do you, you're not gonna get any. And you still may not, but what it does, and letting them know, like, if you have a question and I get to answer it, there's probably 5 other people in this room, right? With like the same question.
You get to learn from each other.
Yeah, you get to learn from each other.
How do you normally do that? Like, I feel like raising hands feels like very formal. Are you just like,
I just say, what question, like if I did the demo with the lake through, I'd say, okay, what questions are there?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, in that kind of situation, yeah.
I don't know, people always feel like they need to like,
And if they do, I haven't had that experience in a regular yoga class where they feel like they have to raise their hand. I would also be sure to, your safety talk at the beginning is really around, like, truly, I'm going to be giving you ideas, but you do what's right for your body. And if you need to rest, come down to the mat. If you want to sit and watch for a while, do that. Like, this is your practice. And the thing is, you're still going to have students who that takes a while for them to get, right? Like, they're still like, oh, efforting and not quite getting like, oh, I don't have to do everything the teacher's saying. It takes a while to get that, but there's certain things we want to build that foundation for their whole yoga lifetime, where they start to get this idea of it's your practice, your body, your mind, your heart, your spirit. You do what's right for you. I'm just giving suggestions. And if you need a break, take a break. Like, no shame in breaks, no shame in doing things differently, that sort of thing. Okay. So now that we're in class, we talked about picking the battles. Let's talk about cueing.
Can I just make a comment for before as well? Like, you might have to give a beginner more regular expectations, like you're gonna wanna practice without socks on, you might wanna have a water bottle near you, like, they're just not even gonna know
Yeah.
what the heck.
Yeah. And be sure you do like, and like set them up so that they know what the heck's going on. So if they need to go down a hall and find a certain doorway, if you can walk them down it, do it. If you can show them where props are and what they might need. I like to set up. I usually, if I have room in the beginners, you don't always, but I might set up exactly what they need at the front. So with my stuff, so they can see what to do. So just the more questions you can take out of their mind throughout the whole process, the more relaxed they can be. Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with this, but personally, it's important what people say after they ask if there are any questions. Because if they're like, good, no questions, good, or
Mhm.
great, then it kind of puts this like thing in their mind. Okay, so I shouldn't have any questions. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know. if
Oh,
that's-
I gotcha. So if they're saying good, kind of like, good job, no questions. Yeah, that's a really, I love that point. And I think it's not the teacher's intention when they say that, but I could see how it could be received that way. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Yeah.
I just want to,
No.
one of the things specifically about Cambio that really helped me when I was new, like, the way, like, using someone's specific name,
Mhm.
like I would like,
not just when you like are greeting them when they come into class or whatever, but I remember like maybe my second class, like hearing like during class, like, good job, Al, like that looks really good. So like and that made me feel like, oh, like this isn't, they're not just teaching, like they're actually paying attention. So I feel like that would like is really nice.
Thank you for saying that. I love that. And that is so true, is using names. And this is in any class, right? And of course, in any class, using them in a way, but especially with beginners, there's like this thing where we want them to feel seen, but not, like you said, the good job, Al thing. Beautiful, or nice halfway lift or whatever. Like, Reba, your back is so long in this pose, like pointing out things that, but also not being, so there's this line too. We want to be aware of how we're speaking to students and how other students are taking that in. So to students personally, of course, we're not going to be like, I don't know, like Ethan, draw your shoulder blades together. Like he'd be like, why did she single me out? And the rest of the class, you're just like, oh my gosh. You might get to a point with students where you know them and they're in a more intermediate type class and you can say things like that, and it's fine. And there's students who appreciate that and want that. But in a beginner's class, we assume they don't. But we do want to use names, and we want to use them with sweetness and with positivity, but also not just praising the people who are like, and this is in any class, like if you're teaching, say it's just Navasana boat pose and they're like folded up like a sandwich, balancing on their little sit bones, and like, okay, maybe you say something to them, but you also, the student who's got their legs down, but is like completely engaged and their breath is so steady. Like, notice who you're pointing out and what that's saying to other students too. All right, that was I got a little off topic, but I think it's pertinent. Cueing. Think about this, beginners, and what I just did with you with Sun B. Do you think you cue more, less, or about the same? Who thinks, let's do a vote. Who thinks more? Okay, no one. Usually it used to be, I must say things differently now because we used to get a bunch of more. Who thinks about the same? Not meaning the same cues, but talk time. Same amount of cueing, yeah. And who thinks less? Okay. It's probably about the same. It might be a little less. What's key here is it's fewer cues, but given more repeatedly and specifically. So I'm not going to get into detail about, I mean, my goodness, you could get into such detail that a beginner leaves like completely overwhelmed and they're like, I don't even understand what my feet are anymore. Like there's now, I think there's 4 points and I don't know what to do with these points on my feet, and I had no idea I had points. So we want to keep it very simple and very focused on what? Safety. I just made balloons come up. I forgot peace signs, right? Yeah, it's safety focused and it's going to be repetitive. So what did you notice that I did with Warrior 2 on, if you noticed, on side 1 versus side 2? What was the cue I gave? Do you remember?
You did
Shoulders.
On side
two.
2. Why didn't I give it on side 1?
What is important is the knee.
Yeah, your knees all looked good. I still gave the knee cue on both, but your knees looked good. So now I'm like, I feel like they're all safe here. So I'm going to move up a little, but then you're still going to watch them and be like, oh, your knee, come back to your knee. But I really only gave the knee cue, but I'm repeating it. I may say it in different ways. I'm really just, but yet it takes so much more talking somehow too, right? So your cueing is going to get also more because you may need to give more transitional cues than you're used to, right? If I've demoed something, then I'm going to get into that breath, pose, cue kind of stuff. Or if they've done it more than once, which is the beauty of vinyasa, is I can kind of guide them through their sun A, first sun A, first sun B with a little more transitional cueing, a little more demoing. But then when I get to the second round, I'm going to try to give some of that vinyasa experience. Right? But yeah, you're right. If I have a room full of brand new beginners and I say inhale warrior two, that's going to be tricky. So that leads me to demoing. It's a whole different ballpark. We are going to demo. Because why? They don't know what it should look like. And Josh, who are they going to look at if they're not looking at you doing it? Right? Yeah. And it's a room full of what?
Beginners.
Yeah. So if I've got a beginner in warrior two like this, that's not who I want other people looking at. And I'm not trying to make fun of them, but wouldn't it be funny to have a video of your first yoga class?
Oh, God.
Can you even imagine? Like, I can't imagine what I was doing. So in this case, that's not the example we want. We want to be sure we're demoing. So there's kind of this up and down, and there's also this letting them know, like I might demo or do part of something with them, but then I'm going to get up and adjust. So I may need to let them know, because if they're watching me, like, let's say I do a cobra pose or something with them, and then I get up to adjust down dog. If I start to stand up and off my mat, they're so watching what I'm doing, they'll get up and they'll just be like, and we're going. So it's good to give them a little heads up. But the thing about demoing that I wasn't exactly able to do in this room is, tell me about this warrior two and how that feels for you versus, we're pretending I'm in warrior two, by the way, this warrior two.
That one feels more open, like engaged with the class, where the other one is like you're facing away.
What do you mean, Lotus? Why don't you feel connected to me? Like, what? Yeah, there is something energetic that happens the second we turn our backs to people, right? I mean, they feel, and we want people to feel safe. So we also want to be connected. There's several reasons we want to mirror rather than turn our backs and do the same thing. One is that connection, and I think that's the big one. Two is, I can't watch you and make sure you're safe, right, Al? If I'm like, okay, keep your knee over your ankle, like, I don't know where your knee's at. The other reason is, and they've done studies, we're so visual as we learn, we actually learn better from a mirroring and being able to then take that in to our brains, turn that into proprioception in our own body so that we feel where it's at in space. It's easier to, if I want to like do what you're doing, I'm going to mirror you. I'm not going to opposite like, and from the front, because we're more aware of our front plane. We don't really even have this, there's this kind of lack of awareness of this side of the body. Right? So I can't, if I'm looking at the back of your body, it's very hard to transplant that into a feeling into what the back of my body should be looking like.
Yeah.
So the mirroring, where do you think it gets trickiest? Left, rights, particularly with what kind of pose? No, keep thinking. Warriors, by the way, you're going to get to where you are. I mean, you've got to go, when you're doing your sun A and sun B, you've got to plan when they're doing their half series, getting to the other side of the room.
You're at sun A one? Oh, missing.
Twisting's kind of a nightmare. You have got to learn to always just start this now as a yoga teacher. It's good practice anyway for any class. Your left leg is never your left leg ever again. from this day forward, it's what?
Right.
It's your right leg. Yes, you are always going to call this right and this left. Just, you've got to, you can do it though. And it's probably really good for your brain. It's because, okay, so watch this. If I want you twisting a certain way and you can follow me. So come to seated position and bring your left heel toward your right glute. Leg is down. Your right leg's going to go over. Good. Lift your left arm up and twist to the right. So what's happening is you're mirroring me. You can't see it because you're kind of off to the side, rather than me being opposite of you. So especially if you're just beginning and you're trying to make these weird twisty shapes, or even just another example, if we're just seated, so just come to a seated, comfortable position, reach your arms up. Good. Bring your right hand to your left leg and then your left hand behind you. Now, if you're watching me, we're like, if you look at Maggie and I right now, Josh, take a look real quick so you can see what I mean. See how since I'm in front of her, she's mirroring me, even though I'm using opposite sides of my body. And that's going to be easier for your brain. And twists are going to confuse people anyway. Did that answer the question okay? All right. Let's talk. I'm going to save Ujjayi breath for the last one, but let's talk adjustments. Do we adjust? And we'll just do thumbs. Thumbs up is going to be more, about the same. Making things happen again. About the same will be here and less will be here. So what do you think for hands-on assists? And be willing to be wrong or be right, but in a different way. Take a gamble. All right. Yeah, it's honestly, by the way, there's lots of right way to do things. I'm giving you my experience and what I've learned. Over 2 decades of really teaching beginners, a lot of beginners. My experience is that it's important to give hands-on assists from the very first class so that they don't get the bejesus scared out of them once they go to a class where a teacher isn't like more softly bringing them into it. Like if you go to a beginner's class and you don't see any hands-on assists and then you take like Laura's class and she comes up and puts her hands on you, right? Like, whoa, or, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. So hands-on assist with beginners is an opportunity to of course, help them get safer in a pose. And I always tell them why I do hands-on assist. And of course, I always let them opt in or out, depending on the class size. We either do an opt-in or out. But I talk about this is never a criticism. It's just to either help you I can see that you can get a little deeper in there, or I'm just making sure we're safe. I like to have them see that I'm adjusting everyone, because there's always that like beginner superstar. What do you think I mean by that? Not necessarily, although that can happen too. What else, Lotus?
They go into the practice and they're pretty good at it so far. And you're like, wow, you're a beginner. This is kind of cool. But if you recognize that, like maybe either like not tension, but it's like, oh, other people are like, oh, I'm not doing that. Is that I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to be for me, which is against it's not flowing correctly. We want them to come back. And then for that person, they're like, oh, I'm doing great. And because they're feeling very comfortable, maybe they are going too far or unsafe.
So that's a great answer. It's not the one I was looking for, but it is, but it's true. And I think it's worth saying. I think you're spot on with it. So thank you for that. Kind of what I'm thinking of when I say that, and that's why I say stuff like that, because then we get these other little gems of information that come up. The other way, or how I was looking at it, is we have these people who really get attached to going to beginners classes. And no matter what we do, they won't leave the nest. and we love them, but they go to beginners because they get to a point of where they feel confident and good. Every beginner in that class knows who that person is. They can see there's just this thing, even if you've never done yoga before, you know who that person is who's got like the warrior too, right? Or who maybe they've gone to other classes and they're coming back. So they're doing, like, I'm not going to teach chaturanga in a beginner's class, but maybe they're doing it. So everyone is dialed in on them. I'm going to make sure they see me adjust that person. Why?
To destigmatize the adjustments.
Yeah. Because otherwise it can be like, oh, I'm the suckiest one in class. And that's why she keeps coming over and doing this. Instead, it's like, oh, even that person up there who's like, whoa, she's making little changes. She's supporting them with assists. What's a good pose where you can almost work right down the line and everyone sees you adjusting lots of people? But you had one. Well, Shavasana, I heard Shavasana, they can hear you doing it. Yeah. And we'll talk Shavasana. Remind me to come back to Shavasana, please, because I want to get that. What were you going to say? Did you have one now? That's exactly what I was thinking of. There's lots, there's like just standing at Tadasana is another good one. Halfway lift is a great one because you can just go down the line and it's a gentle one. It's hardly hands-on at all. It generally feels safe. They hear you coming. They can watch you out of the corner of their eye. And it's one almost everyone needs too, because beginners are like this, right? And you can just go right down the line and they've seen, okay, this is part of it and it's not just me.
When you go down the line, are you?
Of students.
Like even in halfway lift, like.
Yeah, if I have them, like, I'll probably have them hold the first one a few seconds because I want them to feel it. So we might do slightly, we'll talk about hold length in a minute, but I'll just, inhale, halfway lift, draw your shoulder blades together, let your collarbones open wide.
Okay, yeah.
And I've got 3, maybe 4 people. I might say, stay here and breathe, bring in your core. We're going to feel this. It's like the number 7, but maybe your knees are bent, like just, and they see, I've gone down the line of people. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that. The thing I want to say about Shavasana, I like to give them another opt in or out at Shavasana time. And I specifically bring it up because this is another point where if all of a sudden, first off, just Shavasana feels so weird for people. You're like, not everyone, but a lot of people are like, I'm in a room with a bunch of people I don't know, and I'm just supposed to have my eyes closed and lie here and do what? Because we have to actually build relaxation endurance. Like that first time of trying to relax, instead for most people, Shavasana is not necessarily a relaxing experience the first time. Some people it is, and that's awesome. So I let them know the adjustment I'm going to give. So if I'm going to I'm just going to do a light cranial massage or something like that. And it's just meant to feel good. If you would like it, I usually have them opt in. Rest your hand on your stomach. And then I know exactly who wants that adjustment and I just go down and give it. But then if you do it, make sure you have time because if the whole class says yes, you better get everyone. Speaking of the end of class and Shavasana, you are going to leave time to bring them out. We always want to do this anyway, but of course there are times where teachers run out of time and they're like, take longer if you'd like or whatever. And in beginner's class, that's not going to fly for them, generally speaking. So make sure you're leaving time to bring them out. All right, what do you think about Ujjayi breath?
It can be difficult for some people.
I'm going to just change your sentence to all. All except maybe 1 in 100. I do have a friend who got Ujjayi breath right away, but it's like, but the poses, I hate the poses. And I'm like, this is strange. Ujjayi breath, again, pick your battles. So I might teach it at the beginning while they're seated and with the whole, like, pretend you're holding up a mirror, fogging it up kind of thing. And I'll say, we're gonna come back to that. I'm gonna demo it. So you're gonna hear me breathing like Darth Vader. Right? Like when you hear that, I want you to try to do it. And you may not do it today, and that's okay. I really feel like if I get 1 to 3 good Ujjayi breaths out of a beginner's class, I have like the balloon should fall from the ceiling. It's what should happen. It's kind of a miracle. But this is where teaching beginners, you want to be sure you're really breathing the Ujjayi breath as you teach. Okay, what else? Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll get into that in a moment. That's gonna be one of our filters.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's okay. If I say we're gonna get that in the moment, it's still great you brought it up. Yeah.
So I'm one of those people who started yoga when I was a kid.
Mhm.
So it's hard for me to think that Shavasana is a relaxing pose. I don't know. So I appreciate you saying that because I wasn't even thinking, I was like, Shavasana is just like peaceful, relaxing.
No.
I've always felt that way. And then, since I started yoga.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it's one of those things where kind of like Caleb was talking about, if you've grown up with it, it's hard to get in that total beginners, what it's like for a beginner. So you might just have to question things like, oh, I'm asking them to do do this thing that never happens outside the yoga classroom, and like think about what all those things are, even just a stranger coming up and touching them, right? Like how often in life, Christina, has someone just come up and be like, here, let me rub your head. Thank goodness, let's hope only in the yoga classroom or maybe at home. But it's so, what we do in here is so extraordinarily, even the breathing, because you'll be like, Ujjayi breath is done with sound, and people are still just like, but they don't really mean that. They're just saying that. And like even the breath, like if you say inhale, halfway lift, I remember in my early days, I really thought the breaths were just suggestions. Like just, you don't really mean that. Like, I'm just trying to make this shape. So so we're asking them to do, there's so many weird things that one of them is probably going to bump up into their probably pretty far out of their comfort zone and pretty far into their stretch zone. And we want to just be as much as we can aware of that, but certainly not to the point where we get paranoid about teaching beginners. Yes, Maggie.
And I guess just to make a comment off that, like, I was one of those people. I did not like it. It actually was like painful for me because I had like lower back and hip issues. So they would cue you into it and be like, well, there are no other options. We are just doing this. So I'd have like a scrunched up pain face.
Mhm.
And it's like relaxation. Okay.
Yeah, I love, so, Shanti is one of my favorite teachers. She's coming in July. She's doing a Friday night workshop. I know you all are probably overloaded on yoga, but one of the things she talks about is like relaxation. Literally, we have to build endurance for it. Like we are so in fight or flight. We're in this like sympathetic versus parasympathetic system all the time, all day, every day, that it actually becomes a habit in our bodies. And our bodies get used to feeling a certain way, which then gets the vrittis in our minds going a certain way. And we get this loop. And it's like, it can make trying to relax painful because the body literally is full of chemicals and hormones going, no, you cannot relax. And so we have to like slowly build that. For many of us, actually build a tolerance to it because it's so deeply uncomfortable. And then if you have physical stuff, I do need to get moving. Can it hold?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And if we have time at the end, let me know. Thank you for being here. Have fun. All right, so we are going to, in a moment, divide into groups, and you are going to take a piece of the Cambio sequence, a chunk of it, and you are going to go through this filter of questions I'll give you, and you'll be changing it and modifying it for beginners. Now, the first thing you'll talk about, so let's say you have the Sun A section. You're going to go through each pose, but you're also going to zoom out and look at it as a whole and ask. So these are the 4 questions, and I wish I would have brought a board, but I think you're okay with remembering 4 things, or writing them down. What will you change the length of? So which poses are too long or too short? For instance, what's a pose in integration that may not be held, that may be uncomfortable if held a long time? Yeah, say, who said that? Ethan? Say more. Yeah. It could be torture pose. Plus, again, just that psychological, like, I can't see what's going on. It's very vulnerable. And so just being in this new experience, we might need to tighten up and do more of our talking before, because we do quite a bit of talking in child's pose, right? So we may need to plan for a shorter child's pose. So think about those. And there may be some you need to make longer. Like what? Tadasana, down dog. Possibly. I mean, I can see either of those. I can also see down dog making it shorter, because it feels, down dog is another weird one. Once we get to it, it is a resting posture. Once we get it in our bodies, it's neutralizing for the spine, it's resting. But at first you're like, my butt's in the air. Where is my head go? And their shoulders are up here. One I'm thinking of, and I don't know if you noticed I did this, but I changed the half series. And I think I forgot my second breath on the second side, but I did exhale, hands to the mat, plank on the knees, inhale, exhale down to the belly. So I increased the length of that whole span because, I mean, that's a long time, right? From warrior 2 all the way through plank to on the belly. I like to get another breath in there so they can get their plank pose before they lower. Otherwise too, they just kind of tend to do strange things between warrior 2 and the belly. So think about, there may be things that need more time. There may be things that need less time. Next question. What are you going to modify and how? So I actually like that. I'm going to keep doing, I keep making balloons come up when I do the peace sign. Modification might mean doing revolve crescent how? From the knee. And not even giving, I mean, I'll be honest, I'd rather people get good muscle memory for like great alignment in the modified version. I'm not even gonna give the option to lift the knee. I do the same with plank. I don't care how strong a person looks when they come in. We're gonna get a really solid plank where from the side it's ear, shoulder, hip, and knee, and lowering down is safe. I'm not even gonna talk about plank on the toes with beginners. I don't care how tough you are. Like, we're gonna get this. I may only get them for 1 class. So if I can build a little bit of that good alignment, I'm going to. And it's still the pose. Yeah, so half series definitely needs modification, right? All right, so what were the first 2 questions?
Change
Length and modify. The next one is, and this one gets tricky, what poses are you going to cut? Because believe you me, you don't have time. You do not have time. Beginner stuff takes so long. So think about, sometimes it's just not appropriate for beginners or the beginners class you have. Who can think of a pose where generally you're probably going to cut it for beginners? Lizard lunge. Interesting. You're not wrong. What else? Pro, that's the one I had in mind. These aren't wrong. And in fact, I cut extended side angle. I'll tell you why later. And what was the other one? I cut lizard too. By the way, so let me get this. I cut lizard because it just takes so long to get them into it. And at that point, I don't have time and I'm like, we've stretched. Let me make my point with this. I am going to spend time on lizard because it makes a good point that I want to make anyway. If you cut something, we still want a well-rounded sequence. So we have to ask ourselves, is this stuff happening elsewhere? So if in lizard lunge, part of what's happening is hip flexor. Well, and I know I'm not really in a lizard, but where else might this have happened earlier? Crescent. Yeah. Or if you don't do crescent, but you do enchaîné knee down one, we're still getting into here. And all of these are still starting to get into some of this stuff. But I'm going to ask myself, in general, the big things I want to get, like hip flexors are big. We really want to get those. Like, did I get that elsewhere? And by the way, usually it's a yes for that one. Now crow pose. Ethan, why would you not teach crow pose to beginners? Yeah. Here's the thing I would say. 90% of the time, I don't teach it, but there is a 10%. I used to teach at 6 a.m. Is it called military? Do I have military folks in here? Is it called PT? Their exercise? They would come once a week. I had a group from the Army who would come once a week, and their first class, and it was a group of guys there was a very bro kind of attitude. I don't know how else to say it, where I was like, they don't want to be here. Like the person who set this up kind of hates me. Like, what is happening? They were just like, basically like yoga's stupid, yoga's stretchy, yoga. So I'm like, we're doing crow. Not just to show them it can be physically challenging, but to give them a success. Because the first part of class, do you know what their forward folds were like?
Like this.
Oh, these guys were so stiff. I felt so, and so they weren't having any successes, even though I was teaching a modified sequence. There was some of them and I'm not to say all of them had bad attitudes, but I wanted to give them a success. And I knew crow would do it. And also like this kind of like, ooh, there's more here. So I gave them crow and then they had fun and they lightened up and they loved yoga.
Is the fan in here? Yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So there are times, and also we can always teach a modified one if we want to have fun and maybe it's a small class and we want to do that, but yeah. So think about what you're going to cut and always then think about bigger picture of how does this affect their body and what's happening. Maggie.
And so to ensure that you still have a well-rounded class, that's why you're talking about cutting specific poses and not cutting like, I don't know, like core or crescent, like cutting one of the sections.
Let me say this, I would not cut a whole section because of that, because it's a really well-rounded sequence and each part is doing something, but you have to really identify what's happening. You might wind up with a section gutted, but I still think it's important for us to look at the whole sequence. But I will say this, remember what else you can cut in Sun A and Sun B. The rounds. Are you going to cut rounds or not? Okay, so we've got, how are you going to change the length of time? Then what?
Motions.
Okay, and then? Yeah, then the last one, and you can of course look at these in any order, but what are you going to swap? Here's what I mean by that. If you are like, oh, I want to cut extended side angle, which I usually cut because at that point they've been in this shape with the front. This is their lower body. Let's pretend they've been in this shape with their lower body for a long time. And I still want to get that extension to stretch the QL and just teach them this kind of movement. So I'm like, oh, pardon me. I'm giving you a cut example. This is a cut example. I will cut that because I know I'm going to do triangle. And they've got the low body shape practice through Warrior 2 and Reverse Warrior. Now they're getting the upper body stuff. I love teaching triangle to beginners. Okay. What you might swap, for instance, half pigeon is probably my least favorite pose to teach to beginners. I'm going to tell you, if I teach it, it's going to have to be a class focused on half pigeon, because the wild things that happen are, it's just such a, it's almost as, lizard is another one. I don't know what it is about those. So I'm going to look at it and I'm going to, of course, be like, well, can I just cut it? And I've got this taken care of in what? Presuming I've kept crescent and not cut it, right? Now, this external rotation here is a pretty deep one. I'm usually like, oh, I still want them to get that because that's going to feel good, but I don't really have, especially if I've cut lizard too, I'm not getting that deeper external rotation. So I might swap it with like a figure 4. So there are things where you're not modifying it, you are cutting it, but you still want something to take its place. That's your swap. I know you still don't know your groups or what you're doing, but beyond that, what questions do you have on these 4 things?
Open like a deer pose instead of.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Deer pose. In fact, I have, and that's a great one. Yeah, from if you know yin and deer pose.
Maybe do a tree pose instead of pro for like a balancing. Sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, think about, you'll look more at eagle because that's your balance on the feet. And so you'll think whoever gets that one, you're going to think we definitely want balance. So really good thinking there. Balance is so important. And by the way, it's one of the most frustrating things at first, but it is the first thing that's developed in the body. Before mobility and flexibility and before strength, we get balance. So they will start to have some wins and successes when they practice their balance. So we don't want to cut it, but you're going to have to ask, is eagle too much? Am I going to modify it or swap it?
That was my question. I was like, is eagle pretty advanced?
Let's let the group who gets it discuss. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 of you. We will do. I need to count my part. Give me just a moment to count and use my. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm gonna I didn't mean take a break, although just get caught up when you come back because I got to get going. We'll do. Let's count off by twos. We're gonna. I think if my brain is working right. Usually I plan this out in advance because I know my brain's gonna have a hard time. Let's just count off by twos and we'll see if what I have planned works.
1,
2,
And 1.
2.
No, that's not gonna work. Let's count off into, hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need to count off into 5. Okay. Let's try again. Thank you, Jake.
1,
3.
4.
1, 2,
3,
4, 5.
This will be 1.
2.
3.
Okay, so we'll have a couple of groups of 2 and some 3 groups of 3. Group 1. Raise your hand if you're a 1. And right there, right? Group 1, you are going to get integration and Sun A. Okay. Group 2, raise your hand if you're group 2. All right, you get Sun B and core. Group 3, Raise your hand. Ethan, by the way, you're in group 1. Group 3, you're gonna get, oh, I think you have one of the toughest ones, group 3. You ready for the challenge? Yes, say yes. No, you don't. It's Utkatasana, or pardon me, crescent and Utkatasana. Okay. Group 4, where are you? Right there and there. You have crap. Well, we're gonna have some group. Okay, I did this all wrong. Shoot. I always plan this one in advance and I just spaced it. I'm gonna blame the cupcakes I ate yesterday at the birthday party here. That's okay. Some of you there's gonna be some overlap and it'll be cool because we'll see what different people do. You will have triangle and actually just triangle. But let me say this for you. I want you to pick one other section when you're done with triangle, any section you want. And we'll compare it so we can see there's different ways to do it, right? Okay, group 6. 5. Group 5, thank you. Okay, so, oh, and that's nice. Your names rhyme. I'm sure you've all figured this out. Okay, you'll get the spine and hips and surrender. So that's your section. And you'll just go through. Now, when you do this, this is the one instruction that I think it's maybe a little confusing. So I want to be as clear as I can. You'll do it, but you'll think you're not going to know what everyone's doing. So let's say you're like, oh, I'm cutting half pigeon. You do that assuming you're doing this earlier and it makes it okay. But then if that thing earlier doesn't happen, we just realize this isn't going to be a perfect sequence, right? Because we're doing it in this jigsaw way. Yeah. Okay.
Like, just even if we're gonna swap something, like,
Uh-huh.
I was thinking one thing we would swap in ours, you catch up with in like surrender.
Exactly. You're going to, in your minds, justify it because this is going to come up. You need to be looking out at the whole sequence. It's not going to happen that way in here because they're not going to read your minds, although maybe. But I want you thinking that way, Hannah. Yeah. Okay. Let's start with 17 minutes. Go for it.
Group 1 was integration, group 3 is fancy, right?
Yeah.
Sounds right. Ask your group.
2
minutes, yeah. I'll check in on you at 17 minutes. If you need more, usually we don't need more time. No, oh, real quick, can I get everyone's attention? Because I wasn't clear on something. You're not going to try to teach it. You're just going to go through these and go through those 4 questions for each thing to create your changes. And then we'll briefly present them. We won't have time for all of your great thinking behind like every decision you make. I know. Okay, I'm around other than I'm going to take a bathroom break and you should too if you need one. Let me know if you need anything.
Yeah.